Welcome back to the ready state. One of the questions we get all the time is, when something hurts or I have a painful range, what programming looks like? How do I make sense of modifying what I'm already doing? So I want to talk about something that we call the category system. So when we were looking at movements, we wanted to see how are movements the same, how are movements different. And so I'm going to give you an example of what we call a category 1 movement. So category 1 movement, Cat 1, means that I have a definitive good start position and that I can press through a definitive finish position and finish there, right? So in this case, we'll use strict press as our example. And what ends up happening is that I have this opportunity to be well organized and well connected through range. So what you'll see is that most of the classic strength and conditioning movements found in any college gym, et cetera, bench, squat, strict pull-up, push-up, what you see all of a sudden is, man, they're all category 1 movements. No wonder it's about as much about coordination and connection and movement control in this category 1 system, okay? So what happens when we add category 2 though? So in Cat 2 movements, we start to increase speed. And what that does is decrease sort of connection. And what we see as we start to decrease connection, increase speed, is that we tend to make more errors, and we start to elicit more sort of tissue strain and load. Power has gone up, right? And you can imagine we go from strict press to suddenly we go to the push press. And what ends up happening is that you'll see that big stiff guys love to strict press and starts to get a little dodgy in push press. Of course, you're adding in hips and ankles, and but if we're just talking about the speed of the motion, suddenly I've got to have a place in that start position. I've got to be disconnected, whoop, and sort of arrive on cue in the right place at the right time with the right stability, right? Which is one of the reasons that you'll see kettlebell swings, push press, kipping pull-ups, more dynamic movements starts to become the purview of increased athleticism, right? It starts to look and smell like sport a little bit more, right? And certainly we can easily take category 1 movements and add speed to them. Overpress movements in the bench, speed bench, you're seeing that people have cleverly added a lot of speed to some of these things to elicit all of the responses physiologically, but also we're seeing it as a learning opportunity. So bench looks great, start adding speed bench, you flare a little bit, can't hide anymore. So in our movement diagnostic language, when we move to Cat 3, what we start to see is, man, we have really increased the speed, and usually this obviously goes with a decrease in connection, but sometimes we'll go from open chain to closed chain exercise. So this might be a push jerk. So all of a sudden I have a push jerk in this category 3 movement, which means I'm adding a lot of speed. This is open chain, stops, suddenly becomes closed chain, which means I've got to be able to stabilize on both sides. I've got to be able to move and then simultaneously create distance and organization much more proximally instead of just going towards the end. So opening the hip, right, changing this position from a hang to an overhead, from being able to jump and land. This is running, this is cutting. Really having to change impulse, change direction. And of course what we see is, man, this is life in sport. Can someone handle that speed? Can someone handle those forces? And do they have competency changing direction, changing and managing all those things? And what we see is that many athletes cannot buffer these Cat 3 movements if they don't have the range of motion for it. So one of the simple, easy, quick tests, I hope I won't die doing this because I'm cold, is a category 1 movement might look like an air squat, right? Good control, category 2 movement looks like, can I jump and land and still achieve that force position instantaneously with that loss of connection? And you'll notice that in a movement like an air squat, everyone goblet squat, people are killing it. We give them a wall ball to manage, have them absorb force all of a sudden, it's a disaster. Category 3, where I've got to change direction and shape, and can I land in those bottom positions, means that there's no place for me in a range of motion. In a motor control aspect it's difficult, but from a range of motion, tissue accessibility cannot hide my dysfunction. So when we're ultimately trying to get to the bottom of complex movement problems, we want to see under a little bit of category 3 load. We want to see some of these changing dynamics. because we really need to make sure that we're understanding what we're seeing. But when someone has a pain-related problem, right, when we're trying to get to the bottom of what's going on when we have a painful movement, the first thing we do is we take out the speed. We drop back down to category 1. And often when people have a painful speed movement, we can get them moving again in the language that they're already used to using. Instead of using a whole bunch of correlates, we tend to use movements that are already components of what we're doing, and we add this category 1 movement back in. This becomes the basis of our programming. And what's nice then is that we can actually take that category 1 and start to break it apart into isometrics, right? This gives me a chance to stop, really understand, not just end range, but mid-range, right? It's difficult to front squat and pause. We can really see what's going on. And then we also have the powerful tool of tempo. And I don't care who you are or what you're doing, if you're working in rehab or trying to reclaim or redevelop a motor system that's been painful or a biomotor expression that's dysfunctional, ultimately everyone's tools come down to isometrics or tempo. And so in this category 1 piece, if someone, you don't necessarily have to have a whole correlate movement language system, you can drop right back in to some of the strict variations of the things you're doing. Right? So, hey, I have a hard time with a kettlebell swing on this high pull, this internal rotated position hurts my shoulder. Well, suddenly, no wonder what this Cuban curl press looks like, right? Being able to manage that range under slow control to get the brain to appreciate that this is what we're doing, to normalize those tissues, and to be able to rebuild capacity there. And to do that, well, we can stop, we can go slow, stay in your category 1 movements, and then when you start adding speed to that mess, then we start to see if the truth is true or not. One of the big problems in rehab is that we only ever challenge people with subsets of category 1 movements. Then we're like, you're good to go, you're crushing this sub-isolated, category 1 movement. You go back to sport and we don't ever have solved the problem. That's an incomplete rehab process. So, the idea here in our category 1, category 2, category 3 is to think about the complexity of your programming, and when someone has a painful range or something that's not working, slow them down, make them control the ranges that are pain-free, make sure that they have well-connected systems that they can stay and show that they can demonstrate that positional competency and integrity even when they're going very slow. It doesn't always have to be heavy to be hard. Category systems help you untangle that nasty, nasty pain.